I'd like to call the meeting or the appeals committee meeting to order on this April 8th, 2026. My name is, I'm the city councillor Ross Eady, and I'll be your chairperson today. And I'll introduce and then do the land acknowledgement. With us today, my colleagues are Councillor Dobson from the St. James Ward, Councillor Mays from the St. Vital Ward, and Councillor Rowlands from the Fort Rouge East Fort Garry Ward. With us today, we have a couple of people from our planning department regarding the appeals. And we also have with us today our senior clerk, Carly Dolsky. We are meeting here on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and it is also the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We receive our water from Shoal Lake 40 in Treaty 3 territory. I believe we have to move the minutes of the last appeal committee.
Okay, I move that the minutes of the meeting held March 25th, 2026 be taken as read and confirmed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried. Ms. Dolsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In accordance with the City of Winnipeg Charter and the Development Procedures Bylaw, the process the committee will follow is the appellant will be heard first, followed by those in support of the appeal. Next, those registered in opposition are heard, followed by those registered for information. Finally, the appellant may return to speak in rebuttal to comments made. However, no new information is permitted. Please note that when your name is called, it is your opportunity to speak. However, you are not obligated to do so. For a more in-depth overview of the public hearing process and other information pertaining to what happens before, during, and after a public hearing, please consult the City Clerk's Department website. Please note that all public hearings are recorded and will be part of the public record. Should you have any questions after the hearings have concluded, please contact the City Clerk's Department. Okay, so item number 1 was an appeal for against the decision of the Director of Planning, Property and Development to reject a variance for 9 St. David Road under file number DAB 11187A/2026C. As well, item number 2, an appeal against the decision of the Director of Planning, Property and Development to reject a variance for 1035 Chevrier Boulevard under file number DAB 267754A/2025C. For both of these items, the applicant has withdrawn their application, and so we will not hear those appeals today. Okay.
Get a great rant ready, John.
So we'll move on to item number 3. Yes, Mr. Chair, is an appeal against the decision of the Director of Planning, Property and Development to reject a variance for 689 and 691 Harstone Road under file number DAB 1053458/2026B. Members of committee, please note communications were received in support of and in opposition to the appeal, which have been distributed to all members of the committee. We have no one joining us over Zoom for this item, so we can move on to the introduction from our planner, Mr. Chair.
Good day, councillors and Ms. Clerk. The subject property is located on the east side of Harstone Road, south of Eldridge Avenue, in the Eric Coy neighborhood of Charleswood, Tuxedo, Westwood Ward. The subject site is 43,523 square feet, 4,043 square meters in area. The site is currently occupied by a single-family dwelling built in 1959 and used as a private residence. The subject site is accessed by a driveway leading from Harstone to the attached garage. The applicant intends to subdivide the site into 2 buildable lots. The existing single-family dwelling on the site will be demolished. The applicant intends to build 2 new single-family dwellings, both with a front yard setback of 26 feet and north and south side yards of 4 feet. The variance for the reduced side yard setbacks is not supported by the urban planning as the requirement is 10 feet. The variances for the reduced front yard setbacks are not supported by urban planning as the front yard alignment was calculated at 69 feet. The proposed front and side yard setbacks create a substantial adverse effect and is not consistent with the front or side yard setbacks of other dwellings in the vicinity. The proposed front yard setback is not the minimum modification of the zoning bylaw. For these reasons, the Urban Planning and Design Division recommends reduction of the proposed front and side yard setback requests. This concludes my summary. However, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alex?
May not be material. Chip seal street, which is also common in Charleswood, or not gravel, right? It's gotta be
No, it's concrete.
concrete. Okay.
Talk more about the collaborative design process.
In what regards exactly? Like,
Well, there was a bit back and forth with the applicant. And talk to me more about that.
I indicated that I wouldn't be supporting the variances that were already requested previously and not proceeded with or not approved. I indicated my stance and how I felt about it, and that was about it. There was not much back and forth with the applicant on this. They indicated immediately that they were proceeding to appeal.
One question here.
Go ahead.
If you're okay. It says, front yard of 25.5 feet instead of 69 feet. The average on the street is 69?
Correct.
Okay, so that's like 45 feet close.
Difference, yes.
I missed something there. Has this come through before then? There was talk of
Big time.
previously being rejected.
Yeah, it came through previously. Unfortunately, I was not on those files at that time. I've only dealt with the current file.
Okay. But these, well, I guess we'll hear the evidence. Similar, identical,
I'll let you know.
similar issues.
Today.
Almost identical. They were asking for 26 and 4 feet,
Okay.
and that was back in 2024.
Okay, thank you.
And the front street is chip sealed.
Did we change the rules this time? Or maybe this reflects the change rules that we used to get them in a 3-month cycle and you just kept waiting, trying to get the right meeting to hear it, but this is. It's outside of the window. This was too early to get caught by that rule. Didn't we have it has to go to community committee, doesn't it, if you're going back again, but this might have been too.
This wouldn't have been a rezoning, this is just, it was originally just a C variance
Yeah,
or
a
a B
subdivision.
variance previously. Okay.
But didn't we change the rules around this exact thing? We just keep throwing in the same variance basically and you keep getting.
Was this application made?
That
The
could be-
previous
might
one for
predate
2 years? Oh,
Yes.
You said it was in 2024, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as long as it was a
fair point.
a while ago. Thank you.
Of
course.
All right. Ready? More questions? Okay. Wolski can,
Sure, so we.
call the appellant, I'm not sure.
Yes, we don't have the appellant here today. They did not register to attend, to speak to the committee. They sent in a written submission. So just to confirm though, Harmandeep Singh, the appellant, you're not here today. We do have someone, we can move on to then to those in support of the appeal, and we have John Winthrop joining us in person.
Great. Mr. Winthrop.
Morning, I do have a presentation.
Okay.
The dazzle to bring with side yards.
Five-minute rules in place, right?
Correct, I have not started it.
Mr.
It's like
Winthrop,
2 minutes to load this, so.
you know that you always do a pretty thorough presentation, so you think you're gonna need a couple more minutes?
Depends on the questions I get, I guess. Sorry, it's gonna take a couple more minutes just to load this thing.
Yeah, well, after your presentation, we'll ask questions.
There we go. I didn't share. I just automatically went like that.
Was it?
Yeah, okay, good. Is it on the Zoom?
Yes.
Sure, okay.
Share screen, the green.
The green button, yeah. Okay. Morning, my name is John Winthrop. I'm here for the appeal at 689-691 Hearthstone Road. I'm not the applicant. The applicant was unable to make it here today, and asked me to attend, so I can't comment on anything that happened during the application process or anything that really happened in the past, like I typically would. So I'm gonna get right into, what we're doing here is it's a 118-foot by 368-foot wide lot, it's being subdivided, had two underlying parcels that can be subdivided at land titles office to create each parcel.
Sir John, 118, sorry.
Yes, 118 wide, but there's two underlying parcels there that you can just go to land titles and get two new land titles, and each one is 59 feet wide.
And 368 feet.
Yeah, 368 feet deep.
Thank you.
I'll get into that in a second, though. They've subdivided to create two 59 by 368-foot wide lots with two new houses. Again, wasn't involved in the design process for whatever reason. Both houses look exactly the same. Typically, usually you ask for one to look different than the other. No variances for the yards or anything, or for the lot area or for the road condition. It's the variances for substandards front and side yards. I know the condition you're talking about, the chip seal. So the variances for the front yard and the side yards for both lots are rejected by the planning department, and that's related to the house. Again, no variances for the lot area or lot width. There's criteria for proving variances. You know that we're in a recent community. A lot of the zoning on this side of the block is R1E. Around it is also R1L. So you have a diversity of zoning on this block. Across the street, it's R1L. To the east of it, it's R1L, depending on where you are. I'll get into that second. The standards between R1E and R1L are very different in terms of lot size and the side yard. The side yard is 10 feet on a 20,000 square foot lot for R1E. R1L is only 4 feet, and the lot is a lot smaller. So there is a big difference between those two. The street out front is a P2 collector. It goes all the way down to Wilkes there. On the east side, the lots range from 10,000 square feet to 1.1 acres. There are 32 lots. A third of those lots are below the R1E lot size. So already a third of the lots are smaller than what the R1E zoning says. The houses are quite large, from 1,900 square feet to 3,500 square feet, and quite wide. Many of the lots are, houses are big. There's some landlocked parcels behind it because there's a plan drawn up in the 1970s by Ray Clausen, my predecessor at City of Winnipeg, who laid out a bunch of lots to be subdivided. This is, so a lot of the lots were subdivided off and created landlocked back in the 70s. So some of the short lots are 225, or in some of them are 368. We're right next to a short lot. A lot of the yards are substandard on these houses along this street. You can see in these pictures here, those are not 10-foot wide yards. They're closer to R1E, which is the 4-foot wide side yards. Again, you can look at the picture here and see in the air photograph, those are not 10-foot side yards. They're closer to 4 feet. I did not get the chance to go on there and measure those, but I can tell by the air photograph, that's not a 10-foot side yard. What we're trying to do here is the lot width for under R1L would be 25 feet, same for R1E, but the R1L requires only 4 feet, which would allow a 51-foot wide house on here. R1E would only allow a 39-foot wide house. Again, I've shown you pictures of houses far wider than 40 feet along this street here. The houses here are 50 foot. They're 50 foot long. On the short lot, it would give you a 106-foot rear yard. On the long lot, 249. I would say probably that's with the 69-foot front yard. So even if they were to build at the front yard, I know the owner is advocating for a front yard requirement, but I will point out that even if you were to subdivide the back off for a future subdivision, you would still have a 106-foot yard depth with the house they're proposing here. I believe under the variances, the match certainly for the side yard to have 4-foot side yard is consistent with the neighborhood. It can be it's compatible with the area. The size of the house is compatible with the surrounding area. The house lot itself fits more towards the R1L zone, not the R1E, which allows the 4-foot side yard. The front yard, I'm not so much, I can say I can support.
Abstention?
Yes.
2 minutes, all those in favor? Aye. Nobody's opposed, continue please.
Yeah, that's what it, again, I think the side yards fit for the character of the area, fit for what would. This would probably be an R1L zone lot. I think the lot size is close to R1L than R1E. But I can't say I can find any kind of support for the front yard. Most of the houses along that block look like they are further back from the front road, at least 40 to 50 feet. Perhaps not quite 69 feet, but even the rear yard, if you were to subdivide that rear yard off in the future to make it a short lot for the future subdivision of the lands further to the east, there's a sufficient yard depth there.
Go ahead, Councilor Rhodes.
Yeah,
So interesting argument. I'll touch on the two things I want you to respond to. The front yard setback, you're saying I can't support it either. I can't find, any other like situation going down and up the street. Want you to comment on that, but also, you keep returning to, even if you were to subdivide it, further. So it sort of begs the question, is that the plan? Is that your client's plan to subdivide the backyard now further, which then answers the question, well, why bother building out in front? You've got plenty of room at the back. So is there, are we here because, it's, are we here for a different reason
no,
than what is shown before us?
I think good planning would want that in the future. I'll go to another map here. There's a street called Dieppe Road, if you pull it up onto iView. And you can see it kind of just stops. Here's a map and it just stops. And there's a whole bunch of landlocked lands and parcels I think the city might own in it. And the city completed a shadow plan back in the 70s. So here's how all these lands, the rear lands could subdivide and become more urban, become more smaller lots than these large lots. See if I got a good picture for the area. Yeah, you can see Dieppe Road here. It comes in and just stops. Well, that road is supposed to be extended out and then connect to Hearthstone and have more not forest vacant land. So back in the day when you could, probably prior to 1979, you could subdivide and create landlocked parcels. So I think a bunch of people did that at one time thinking they were a subdivision was gonna happen back in the 70s. Of course, the economy crashed in the 80s. It didn't pick up for a long time. Where that is now, I don't know. I've seen this a few times in Winnipeg where the backlands have subdivided off more in twice in North Kedona, and I've been involved in between Bonner and what was it, Headmaster Row. Cindy Clausen Way was punched through a bunch of people's rear yards to create some houses. So I've seen it a couple times where that happened. In the future, they can't subdivide that rear portion off now and have it landlocked. The city wouldn't allow that. The policies are clearly don't allow that. But if in the future a bunch of the landowners get together and say we're gonna punch through Dieppe Road, yeah, ideally you'd want that rear subdivided off and have more of an urban standard with two more houses facing a new street to the east of it. That's not what this application is about. If that was to happen, there's sufficient depth of the lot still to be able to meet the front yard requirement at 60 or 69 feet with a size of the house they're proposing, that they can do that in the future. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not locating a house in such a manner that it would preclude future subdivisions in the future for a more intense development, because you really want all those landowners have to be on site to make that happen. I hopefully that answers the comment.
Yes.
On the east side of the road, it's more urban. Those houses were constructed at a later date. It's zoned R1L. Those front yards are quite actually smaller. They're closer to like 35, 40 feet. So on the west side of Hearthstone, the houses are significantly closer to Hearthstone than on the east side.
The front yard setback's problematic. The side yard setback, 4 feet, we see every day here, of course, in different neighborhoods. The issue here is it's R1E, I assume, that it's got this
Yeah.
somewhat.
Then I need 10 feet, and the houses going up today are usually larger.
And these are.
Yeah, these are like 50-foot wide 50-foot wide houses. If I was to go with the 10-foot, then the house would only be like 39 feet. On a 50-foot wide lot, I'm doing houses that are more than 40 feet, 42 to 45 feet. So this house would actually be smaller than the house I typically see on a 50-foot wide lot. I'm doing a duplex down on Lee Boulevard at a public hearing at some point where that house is on a 50-foot wide lot. And the house, is bigger than this house.
Fair point. Just to run the math, still recovering from the drive-in perhaps, so, and maybe to build off Councilor Rollins' question, like, even if you wanted to save the easterly 100 feet for a future lot, which one could understand, you still got a lot of.
Yeah, the lot
Wouldn't
is.
you come back 69 off?
Yeah, if the 368 on the long lot, a 69-foot front yard, the house is 50 feet long, would give you a 249-foot rear yard. And then if you were to subdivide the rear off, on a short lot, you'd still have 106 feet. Like this is quite a long lot. That's why.
Yeah, this is like we got a million in San Vitalo, the 200, the
Yeah.
Worthington. And I mean, the stuff we just didn't all the fourplex stuff didn't get involved with depth. It was all about width.
It's both width,
Yeah.
yeah. Because of concerns with being close to the neighbors. Thankfully, we have letters of support from the neighbors that were submitted here. And it matches with the surrounding neighborhood. You can see that there's other 4-foot wide yards there. They're not 10 feet. This
Yeah,
is starting to become
There's a
more,
front yard issue though.
yeah, it's the
Okay,
front yard,
those are-
and
and that's like-
I can't.
Okay.
I told my client that I can support the side yards, that there's evidence of that. The front yard is what they requested for. So I can understand the point of view of the front yard.
Thank you for working through the math there on that.
Yeah,
Okay, that's all I know.
Okay, Councillor Dawson, any questions?
No, they pretty well covered everything I was gonna ask.
Yeah, Councillor Rollins, you have no more additional questions? All right, okay, I have no questions. Thanks, Mr. Winthrop. He gets to come back. Oh,
So,
no,
you know about.
this is my
Is there
one
any-
chance, so if there's
Is
any
there
other
any
questions.
last comment you'd like to make, Mr. Winthrop?
No, I think we've submitted documentation, so letter of support from adjacent neighbors and surrounding area. They've got their approved subdivision. They're gonna be building on this. This is not gonna stop them building on it. All they're looking for is some side yards. So again, no variances for the lot area or the lot width or for the condition of the road in the front. This is strictly for side yards, which I've shown is prevalent along the street. And the front yard, I leave that to the committee to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Winthrop. Okay.
I will just double check. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in support of the appeal for Hearthstone Road? So meaning you're in support of the project? No? Okay. We can move then to those in opposition to the appeal. So we have Stephanie Almeida joining us in person today. Okay. You can join us here at the table if you'd like.
Hi.
Have 5 minutes for you to make a presentation. And we may have some questions after you're finished.
Okay, most of it's already been covered with the previous person, but I live at 701 Hearthstone, directly to the left of the house, and have for the past 7 years. 695 Hearthstone has been vacant for almost 3 years now. Over the last 2+ years, there's been a variety of trailers and trucks parked in the driveway. Those trailers and trucks have blocked my view out my front window. If a house was built 25 feet from the street, it would completely block my view out the front window. I did send pictures as well by email. 695 Hearthstone again is 118 feet wide by 368 deep. I don't understand why they need to build the house 25 feet from the front and not the 69 feet like other houses on the block when they have a 368 deep property. There's no reason for these proposed properties to be so far in front of all the remaining houses on the block. As indicated previously, every house from Eldridge to Rannoch is about 69 feet back. If that property would end where my property began, that would mean that those neighbors would have direct view of everything in my backyard. I would have no privacy in my backyard. I also do not want the house to be 4 feet from the property line. If I do decide to build a garage in the future, that house would be really close to my garage. I also think it detracts from what this neighborhood is really about, nice, quiet, country style living. This is not the neighborhood to do things like this. I know that they previously had tried to submit a plan for a fourplex there, but that was turned down and they went with a single house on each subdivided property. If their intentions are to build something in the back of the property in the future, which has already been discussed, that request would probably be denied. Qualco was interested in buying the land at the back, some from the previous owner at 695 Hearthstone, and the remainder from a house about 5 houses down. The homeowners on Dieppe refused to make the road bigger and stated they did not want to extend the road, so Qualico walked away. Hearthstone is a very busy road to begin with. Cars use this road to get anywhere between Hearthstone and Community Row, along with others using Wilkes to get to the perimeter or to Sterling Lion. On top of that, it is a bus route, which operates about every half hour and crosses at Rannoch and Hearthstone. There are roughly 5 or 6 cars that park on the street directly across from these proposed new properties from a rental property on the other side of Hearthstone, along with a touring bus that parks on the street in the summer. Hearthstone has a lot of school students walking around in the spring, summer, fall. There are many people walking their dogs or kids around the neighborhood and many bikes that cross the street. I think having 2 houses up front will be a major distraction to an already busy road. Half of the drivers barely stop at the stop sign. They basically just roll right through. If there are multiple cars parked on the road with heavy vehicle traffic, heavy foot traffic, and bikes going up and down the street, it will be very dangerous. Finally, pursuant to this section 247(3) of the charter, an application for a variance with respect to the property has to be safe, has to abide to the amenities and all that, and has to be in minimum requirements of the zoning bylaws and compatible with the area in which the property to be affected is situated. Respectfully, the applicant fails to comply with these 3 requirements. I don't believe that sorry, give me a second. With respect to paragraph B of the charter 247, section 247(3), it will have an adverse effect on the amenities, use, safety, and convenience of the adjoining property. Safety concerns of the street in general, if these properties were built 25 feet from the street, and the fact that it would block the view out my window if a 2-story building came out 40 feet in front of me. And with respect to paragraph C, that land is classified as R1E and has to abide by the 10 feet on both sides of the properties, and also has to abide by the front yard allotment. If the houses are all 69 feet back, it has to be in line with the houses, or at least 80% average. That's in the bylaws. And with respect to paragraph D, it is not compatible with the area in which the property is to be affected is situated, as I've listed.
Yep.
Sorry?
Right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's your, okay, questions.
Pretty good.
I have no questions. I have, are there, so it's a paved front street.
It's paved, it's got 2 ditches on both sides, a really big ditch on one side and
Yeah,
medium.
okay. My question is.
Yeah, sure.
Are there city sidewalks?
No, No city sidewalks. The street, like, even though they say it's quiet, it's not. Like,
So,
there's tons of traffic.
well, no, I understand. It's a P2. That's not,
Yes.
okay. I'm just trying to clarify. You're saying there's danger for people walking their dogs and stuff. So,
When there's
So-
cars parked on the street and then cars coming out, like, they're 25 feet from the front. If they're gonna have tons of cars in their driveway backing up, I just think that's gonna be a concern.
so the people are walking through grass along that road when they're walking their dogs.
They're walking like literally on the edge of the
road.
ditch,
They're
like
walking on
where the rocks are, basically. Like, you've got the pavement, but then you also have like a little bit of rock on both sides, and then it goes into the ditch. So there's not a lot of space for people to walk. That's a concern. And like,
Well, okay, so.
kids aren't watching. If they're on their bikes, they're not watching. Bikes,
all the- So I get that, but do all the properties have front driveways, right?
Yeah.
All the,
Yes.
yes,
on both sides, right?
on both sides, yeah.
Okay, so there's driveways, okay.
There is driveways.
So people with eyesight aren't able to see a car moving down a driveway 25 feet?
They should, but that, between Rannoch and, well, not Rannoch, cause that part is a bus route, but after the bus route, after the first house on the left-hand side, like right on the corner of Hearthstone and Rannoch, it's packed with cars. And then you've got literally no space to drive two cars to and from with bus routes, with kids on their street. To me, I think that's a concern.
Just wanted clarification.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
That's really all the questions I have, so.
I-
Where you going?
Question. We're having an interesting separate debate about the need for variance under the new PDO, the fourplex PDO, and the developers are gonna need to get a variance if they don't connect to the sidewalk. Even if there is no sidewalk, they're still gonna need a variance. Let's make them up on that Lee Boulevard business, for example. Is this is just not under that, this is like totally its own, this is the,
Single family, so it doesn't fall under the two.
They're not using Schedule A C size.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't.
very, okay, thank you.
Separate properties, yeah.
Great, so we're good. Thank you for your
Thank you.
presentation.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in opposition to the appeal for the Hearthstone item, 689 Hearthstone? Anyone who would like to speak for information to the Hearthstone item? So it would be questions of the public service at this time.
Anyone, questions, folks?
So it's single family, it's not under the 2s, 3s, and 4s, but isn't there a,
It's introducing,
the other one that
it's
the,
introducing community, not a mature community.
there you go.
Yeah.
Thank
Not
you.
a mature.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
not a mature community.
So this doesn't touch on the one that
It doesn't.
Scott roll into his chair of playing where we got into. You can't build a triplex on gravel, all that stuff.
Yeah, this has nothing,
is
this
the
is
other
out
thing,
of the-
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Been waiting 14 years for an appeal on Eldridge, so we get Bruce Springsteen referencing, but drive man Eldridge Avenue, and here we are in the moment, Mr. Chair. No, I'll work that into my concluding comments, Bruce.
Sounds like you're prepared to move a motion.
Yeah,
I think Dr. Dobson.
Yeah, I can do it. I would like to move that the report of the Winnipeg Public Service be taken as read.
All those in favor?
I
Nobody's opposed, that's carried.
would move that the receipt of the public representations be concluded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried.
I move that in accordance to subsection 2473 of the City of Winnipeg Charter, the variance is not consistent with Plan Winnipeg and any applicable secondary plan does create a substantial adverse effect on the amenities, use, safety, and convenience of the adjoining property and adjacent area, including an area separated from the property by a street or waterway, is not the minimum modification of a zoning bylaw required to relieve the injurious effects of the zoning bylaw on the applicant's property, and is not compatible with the area in which property to be affected is situated. My supporting reasons are The 4-foot side yards, which it's been a question, does not match anything on the street. This is something that would not reflect what's on the street, so I would not be in favor of that. The front yard setback of 25.5 feet versus the average of 69 is totally out of place for the neighborhood. And if we start allowing that sort of stuff, then it'll be a race to the street for the next house to see how close they can get. We have to be consistent. The average of the street is around 69 feet. That's what we should be going with. Those are my supporting reasons.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor. I mean, it certainly the front yard ones, that just seems pretty easy to say, no, that's not compatible. The 4-foot side yard, it is. You're tempted to start looking at the depth, but then we've done a whole exercise, a whole public hearing process where we really didn't care too much about depth of lots. It was all about width. So it's for whatever, I mean, I suppose they could rezone to shave down the width, requirements, but for today at least, I see the point of the neighbors saying, well, given the nature of the neighborhood, you probably do need a rezoning. And there's that weirdness with the DF and the back lots. It's a very deep lot, clearly, but so the front yard setback is the easy one, so I'll support Councillor Dobson.
Councillor Rowland,
So I'm supportive of Councillor Dobson's motion. It is rare to ask the public service, talk to me about the collaborative design approach. It's an approach that I believe in. It's one that should produce innovative outcomes. We say that right on our website. In this case, the answer was nothing. It was to come to, they wanted to proceed to this body. This body still hasn't substantively heard from them, with all due respect to their representative here today. So for all those reasons and more, it is a rare thing to hear that there was actually no collaboration. I'm supportive of Councillor Dobson's motion.
Okay. And I'll just be making a comment. I will be supporting Councillor Dobson. Yeah, the concept of there could be 2 lots on the back in the future. I don't see this neighborhood developing necessarily all that fast, and I don't think it is an adverse effect. They could build a house further back, and I don't think it will have any issues. So in that, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
Okay, I also moved that the appeal be denied and the decision of the Director of Planning, Property and Development be concurred.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No, nobody's opposed. That's carried.
And I move that the variance order DAV 105345/2026B be canceled. Oh, confirmed? Pardon me. Is that correct? Confirmed? Okay, confirmed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
And I move that the public hearing with respect to this appeal be concluded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried. Thank you.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please note that the committee has made a final decision on this matter, which is not subject to further appeal. Give Councilor Rowlands a moment to recuse herself from the next item. Councilor Rowlands is recusing herself from the next item. She said it on the original hearing.
Enjoy the rest of your day, Councilor Rowland. Yep.
Hoping to get caught, but
Okay, so we can move on now to item number 4. Item 4 is an appeal against the decision of the City Center Community Committee to approve a variance for 160 Ash Street under file number DAV 253320A/2025D. Members of committee, please note communications were received in support of and in opposition to the appeal, which have been distributed to all members of the committee. We do have a few folks who are supposed to be joining us over Zoom today. They haven't yet, but I'll just let them know. All participants will be muted and only permitted to speak when called upon. Once you have been heard, you can either remain in the Zoom meeting or leave and continue to watch live via the city's YouTube channel. If any participants are currently watching the live meeting on YouTube, please mute your audio player now. And we'll have a brief summary from the administration, Mr. Chair.
This property is located on the north side of Academy Road in the Wellington Crescent neighborhood of the River Heights Fort Garry ward. It is located in an established neighborhood, mature community policy area of Complete Communities 2.0. The property has been approved to be rezoned to the RMFS, Residential Multifamily Small District, for the purpose of constructing one 5-unit townhouse development on the site. The building would have a 14-foot front yard setback to the Ash Street property line. It would have a 24-foot north side yard setback. It would have a 6-foot rear yard setback to the lane. And it would have an 8-foot setback to Academy Road. The building would be 3 stories in height and include individual unit entrances facing both Academy Road and one facing Ash Street, with direct pedestrian connections to the sidewalk on Academy Road. It also includes balconies facing both Academy and one balcony facing Ash Street. As part of the overall development, the application requires 2 variances that were approved by the City Center Community Committee at its February 23rd meeting. Those variances included a reduced front yard of 14 feet instead of 39 feet, and a reduced rear yard of 6 feet instead of 25 feet. The reduced yards are mitigated by the 24-foot north side yard setback, which far exceeds the required setback on this property, as well as the use of clerestory windows, which are the narrower sort of above head windows in the east wall, and then the existence of a lane and a parking area at the east, which separates it from properties across the lane. There's also a plan approval requirement associated with the rezoning, and the plan approval would go to the City Center Community Committee and the director. That concludes my summary of the application, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have one question. The front yard would be Academy Road because it appears to be aligned that way?
It's a bit of an odd one. So it's a corner lot. The address is for Ash Street, and so technically the front yard is the Ash Street yard. But you're correct that it's more broadly, this is the infill guidelines support a townhouse style development here. And in doing a townhouse style development here, and what the infill guidelines would envision for this would be a townhouse facing Academy Road. And so they've oriented it towards Academy, but they've kept a west orientation as well towards Ash Street to make sure it's not a blank wall facing Ash. And then that's that large 24-foot north side yard is in many ways functioning as a rear yard. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just through that again, if you, it's okay, so the 2 variances required, the rear yard, which is the east.
Right.
So between easterly limit of the building and back lane, the proposal is for 6 feet, so it visually seems like a side yard, but it's actually the rear yard. And the front yard from Ash Street to the building is 34 feet instead of 39.
No, they're proposing a front yard to not from the street, but from the property line of 14 feet.
It's on the other side of the street.
On the on the Academy house on Ash Street, there's a single family house that's to the north.
In the setback, does that happen?
Yeah,
14,
about 33 feet.
30, so it's,
This is one of these awkward ones where there's a recommendation that isn't followed by the community committee, and then, so the variance is, so staff recommended a front yard of 34 feet instead of 39.
Yes.
But the developer seeks a front yard of 14 feet.
And it is a really awkward policy environment that this application exists within. And so when we approached the main guiding document for this proposal was the infill guidelines. because it's a townhouse, so it's just
Yes,
outside of
and
the.
it's- and it's not swept up under the twos, threes, and fours.
Exactly, and the infill guidelines do fully support a townhouse style development here. The infill guidelines also require typically a 25-foot rear yard and that the front yard be plus or minus 5 feet of the front yard alignment. It then creates a really awkward situation where the high level guiding direction in the infill guidelines would say yes to a townhouse here, but if we followed all of the required front and rear yard components, it would be very difficult to accommodate a townhouse on this site because the front yard is so large. So with that in mind, the administration said, well, our standard practice is plus or minus 5 feet on the front yard, and so we're going to stick to that, and we're going to reduce the required rear yard. And there were, I mean, when the info guidelines are considering front yards, two of the primary components of that is there going to be an adverse effect on the neighbor by arranging your front yard in a way that's different from the block, and is it in character with the existing block? And in this case, to be fair to the application, they have a 24-foot north side yard, and so the notion of a reduced front yard is significantly mitigated by the fact that the building is so far separated from the house to the north. But it's an awkward policy environment.
Walk me through the parking, if you would.
Of course, they are providing attached double car garages for each unit. There would be 10 stalls in the garages. The parking is accessed off of the rear lane through a drive aisle. And so the north side yard.
So you need the 24 feet for that.
They don't need the full 24 feet for that.
You need it.
There would be lots of
I
ways
used
to
to have this
approach
stuff memorized.
it. It's been a little while.
I can block it.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to lay out a drive aisle in that, I mean, if they were to do a one-way, or this is gonna be a two-way drive aisle, of course, but I mean, we have seen examples of signalized drive aisles, so that you can shrink it down significantly. In this case, though, a large part of the north side yard is intended to create significant separation space from the abutting single-family house there to the north, as well as to provide a drive aisle with adequate maneuverability to get into the attached garages. And then there is, I believe it's a 6-foot landscape buffer at the far north, next to the property line on the north.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yes.
Counselor Dobson, did you have any questions?
No, I don't. No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, so Stolsky, call up the appellant.
Okay, sounds great.
Are they on Zoom or?
We have a few folks joining us in person and over Zoom. First, we have Kyle Burkett is an appellant. He's joining us in person today, followed by Brittany Burkett.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of 156 Ash, the property directly to the north of this property. So yeah, just to reiterate sort of, I think the biggest concern for many of the people here that I'm sure they'll speak about is the front yard variance application, which is the west side application. As has been explained already, and you well know, the modifications have to be the minimum acceptable. And this is sort of a unique property. It is right on Academy, and a townhouse would be a change from the single family dwelling that's there, but something that's kind of supported by the city, and I understand that. As it stands, the proposed building is 100 feet long with reduced setbacks on both the front and the rear yard. And the front yard setback is quite significant and differs fairly significantly from the look of the block. Whereas the average, I think, on the block is somewhere between 35 and 39 feet of setback. If you look at other multifamily residences in the area, like 509 Academy, they have a setback that is more in keeping with the other properties on the block. It would be our hope that the development could be modified so that the front yard variance was more in keeping with the rest of the block to keep the look of the block, and also not to block our view from our windows. The property itself, the building itself that they've described is 100 feet with 5 20-foot units. The current request is for a 14-foot setback. The recommendation from the planners and previous was kind of a 34-foot if one of those 20-foot units was deleted from the westerlymost side of the building, it would be right at that 34 feet. It would be 14 plus 20, which would be pretty close to the rest of the block. I'm not sure that the building has to be 5 units long. It seems like 4 units at 20 feet would be more in keeping with the look of the block, more in keeping with the actual recommendations, and more in keeping kind of with the look of the community. There are not many other buildings in the area that are multifamily that extend kind of beyond those variances, as far as I can tell driving down Academy. And so it's our request that you look into that. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you for that. More question for the admin, I guess. The math seems pretty straightforward if it goes from 14 to 34, and yeah, you would lose a 20-foot wide unit, presumably. Does that change the whole, not the economics, but the legal? Are we now into the murky waters of the fourplex PDO?
Yes, if they were not to use, if they were to remove a unit and do a fourplex instead, then the required side yard would, well, it would still be required to have a significant front yard, but the required north side yard would drop to 4 feet instead. So the design would, it depends on what the applicant chose to do with their site, but yes, the site would potentially change radically.
But they rezoned it, right? So.
That's correct.
I forgot. Any questions, Councillor Dobson?
I'm just thinking of what they just pointed out. So if it was a fourplex and under fourplex rules, they could literally build the house 4 feet from the property line on the north side and then put the drive in the front if that's what they.
The driver, the parking would still be required from the rear lane.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, but from the rear lane, but it could be along Academy. An exact reverse. Just move the house closer to the north property, they could do that.
That's what
Within
they would
4
have.
feet.
They could.
Yeah,
It would be more of, I mean, they'd have, there's
Would
lots
be-
of criteria around what the design would look like.
yeah,
But
which would not. be a
in
good
general,
thing.
it would likely end up as more of a square design with access from the rear lane and reduced north side yard and depending on what the committee chose to do with the front yard, that would be a major consideration.
All right, that wasn't the appellant. Anyway, you'll be able to come back, once you've heard, whatever and rebut, but not provide any new information.
Sorry, another question for the.
Well, you do have a
I
question?
think, for the, no height variance here, and the height of the building is,
It's, I believe it's about 30 feet or just over 30 feet in height.
so it's allowable.
It's below the maximum allowed height.
Okay, yeah. This isn't a corridor in the mall, the corridor is.
No, it's not.
Well, sir, you were talking about, so the front yard's 14 feet. You were, so the height doesn't sound very high. You referred to looking over into other yards as well. You're the north property, so can you help me understand that issue a bit? Because
Yeah.
it seems like the actual residence is quite a distance away.
Yeah, for sure. The residence is a distance away. It's on the south side of the lot, so the furthest side away from my property. Just that a 5 unit, 100-foot long complex built even on that south side just creates like a fairly large building mass across the whole of the property. Whereas when you go down the street, all of the other houses are set back kind of 35-ish feet. And so just right now, when we look out our front windows, we sort of see Academy and the activity down there and the action of the street. And this would sort of just, in my mind, create a wall across that.
So yeah, this is closer up to Ashlow, like the further west you go on Academy, the closer the buildings are to Academy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, thank you. And we'll hear from the next appellant.
Yes, next up we have Brittany Burkett, also joining us in person. Good morning. So yes, my name is Brittany Burkett. I live at 156 Ash with Kyle. So we're directly north of this property in this new multifamily unit. So my reason today for appealing this variance is that the developer's proposal does not meet the front yard regulations of the infill guidelines, which requires the front yards to be plus or minus 5 feet of the average front yard on the street of which it's built. So the average front yard setback on Ash, I think my husband said 35, it's actually 39 feet. The developers are requesting a front yard reduction to 14 feet. So this is a drastic reduction in the front yard footage, and it is out of context with the remainder of the homes on Ash Street. I do, as Kyle alluded to, I am also concerned, being the property directly north to this, that it is going to create a wall and a barrier. We have a lot of windows that would be facing this unit, and it would be obstructing a lot of our views out of that side of our house. I also fear that this sets a dangerous precedent for other new developments on Ash Street. And so I did bring this up at the first public hearing. As we know, there's a lot of new infill homes that are going up in River Heights. If we're allowing this reduction to a 14-foot front yard, when the house, the other house next to us gets torn down, are they now going to be able to build their house closer to Ash Street as well? I think that would have a negative effect on the character and the desirability of this block. One other interesting point was that the city planners were consulted on this variance, and they actually recommended against the requested variance in the review of the proposal. So they had recommended that the front yard variance be modified from 39 feet to 34 feet, which is in keeping with the infill guidelines, and actually recommended against the variance going down to 14 feet. This recommendation was disregarded and overridden in the first public hearing without much explanation or rationale for same. So I was wondering, what is the point of consulting the city planners if their recommendations are ignored? I do feel that a multifamily property at 160 Ash can be developed in compliance with existing zoning regulations. And I understand that there's some debate, if we go from a 5 townhouse to a 4-plex, would that then refigure the whole development? The other option I feel is to take that 5 townhouse and delete one of them, and you remain with 4 townhouses, and you still would allow for that 34 or 35 foot front yard allotment. So I respectfully ask that we ask the developers to abide by these regulations.
First thing I'll point out, so if you have the proper lot space, it's a right to build 4 units. In this case, it's being rezoned, right, to a multifamily small. There's some measurements. There's no variance for lot space to unit, is there in this one? No, there's not. There's not, okay. So usually that, if a variance was required there, that means the lot may not support 5 units, but the property owner rezoned, right, this property to multifamily small. Anybody who has the lot space can build a 4-plex. Like the one across the street on Ash, they can build a 4-plex. It's just automatic if they have the space. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, you'd heard, thank you for the presentation, and just the lot dimensions again, if from planners.
You want to know the width and the
Yeah,
depth?
50 by 100 or ish.
36 point, how are you with meters? What feet? 119 feet in length, so that's running along Academy. And 75 and a half about feet in width.
Oh, okay. Probably not a fair question, so you can decline to answer if you choose to, but you heard what the plans were saying, like if you shave it down to 4 units, they could move the building north. They could move the building 4 feet off the property line to the north where you are, right? I mean, is that, we sometimes ask people this, like, would you is that a better option than this layout? You don't have to answer that question, but we wrestle with these things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's something I would have to consider. But could they also just remove one unit and leave it as is? That's also an option. You know, if they're gonna go down to 4 units, they still have 4 units exactly in the footprint that they presented to us. So I think that that's also a very reasonable option.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I've got it.
We're gonna hear from anybody opposed, so we'll let them speak.
Okay.
Cause there is a substantial cost to rezone a property, right? So, okay.
Okay, so next we have the next appellant joining us over Zoom. We have Curtis Boughton and perhaps Kim Boughton as well, but we'll get Curtis on Zoom here. If you could just mute your microphone. And, chat.
Oh, hi, am I there? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, hi. Yeah, the video isn't on. It's been disabled at your end. It seems like I was trying to turn it on. But anyways, thank you for the committee's time and for hearing the appeal. I appreciate your time. I just want to go over the part of the justification that I heard at the beginning of the rollout of this justification. It was that the 24-foot variance or sort of allowance to the Burkitt's house somehow was a justification of why the front yard could be 14 feet. And I think that's a false comparison. You know, the city has guidelines and they spend millions of dollars coming up with infill guidelines. They spend a lot of time with staffing. And I think that the guidelines and the staff should be listened to in this case. And a 14-foot front yard is a drastic change from the average 34-foot recommendation of Dylan, the city planner, who I spoke to before the first hearing on this issue. And I was actually surprised to hear that the original committee disregarded the city's infill guidelines, also disregarded the recommendation of their own staff and went forward to approve a drastic change, not a small change, a drastic change to the front yard, which would affect Ash Street. I also think that, you know, hypothetically what the developer could do or might do is a conversation for another time. And it doesn't affect, you know, the decision that this committee should consider, the appeal should consider. Really, we should be looking at the guidelines for the front yard and what is the recommendations of the planner were and what the infill guidelines are. It was also mentioned that, you know, the developer could just have parking off of Academy. And I don't think that that's realistic as well, because there's a bus stop on Academy. Unless the city's willing to move bus stops, they're not going to have the property set back against the Burkitt's house and have front yard parking on Academy, because it wouldn't be allowed by the bus route that's there. So I think that, you know, overall, we're, as residents, we want to maintain the character of Ash Street as you drive onto it, and that all the houses are built. I just built a house on Ash Street about 4 years ago, and this was a real sticking point when I had to build my house, that I maintain what the average setback was. And there were all kinds of calculations done by the city planning office, and I wanted to build it 1 or 2 feet closer, not 25 feet closer than what this property is. And the planner told me that they wouldn't support, you know, the houses being built past whatever the infill standards are. So I'm hoping that this committee sees fit to abide by the infill guidelines, to keep the character of all of the neighborhoods that those infill guidelines are supposed to protect in accordance with those guidelines. And I think that the developer can develop on the property within inside those guidelines. And I think that that's a reasonable request. And what that next iteration of the property looks like, I guess that's up to the developer and adhering to the guidelines. But you know, as residents, we don't feel that is in the character of the neighborhood. I also want to say that there might have been a misrepresentation by the original proposal of who was supporting the proposal. And the applicant, made representation in a slide at that original hearing that so many addresses were for this development. And that is not the case, because if you look at the properties that they said were for this development and their proposal as it stands, and you look at the addresses that are opposing the development, you'll see that there is a juxtaposition of that claim, and that perhaps the original committee that approved this and how it got to the appeal in the first place was the fact that, all of that information might not have been understood, and that the residents of this street are fairly consolidated behind the idea that the front yard not be compromised to the character of the street. I just think that if somebody's going to build infill housing, they need to do it by the guidelines. And if those guidelines aren't met, then the development shouldn't be approved and the variances shouldn't be approved. And at this point, the committee should look at that in regards to the infill guidelines and nothing more. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, colleagues?
I think perhaps, and you can correct me if I misunderstood, I mean, I think the trade-off was normally on these, very few fiveplexes, a lot of fourplexes out there. Normally the trade-off is you can't park in the front yard. You gotta have on-site parking.
Mm-hmm.
The side yards are too narrow, so you have a lot of rules about drive aisles and angles, and the parking lot is in the back, is in the rear yard. But here, there's only 6 feet in the rear yard. We can't park there, but we'll have a side yard on the north that's far bigger than what's required, and that's where the drive aisle and the landscape buffer and all that stuff is going. So you talked about the front yard being a trade-off. I don't know if that was it. That's not how I see this. I think the trade-off is the distance from end of building to back lane is quite short, but that's a trade-off in order to, you're still staying off the back lane to park, but you're in the rear yard, even though it feels like a side yard. So none of that takes away from your argument that it shouldn't be 14 feet, it should be 34. That's a fair argument to make. It's just, I think the trade-off was the rear end.
But okay.
Front yard.
Okay, can I respond to that?
Yep.
Yeah.
As residents, we don't feel that that's a trade-off. The character of the street is what you see as you drive on Ash Street. And the city's guidelines say that corner lots need to take in the aesthetics of both as a corner lot, you have to take in the aesthetics of both streets. And so the rear that you're talking about, which is 24 feet, is something that's not seen. It's behind the street. So it's not really a trade-off for aesthetics. The aesthetic is the 14 feet that you see as you drive on Ash Street, which would block the Burkitt's view and the character of all the rest of the street as you drive up to Ash Street. And the city's guidelines have that needs to be taken into consideration, which is why when I talked to the city planner, Dylan, their recommendation was the 34 feet in keeping with that character. And he didn't see that trade-off. He was allowing the back lane to be closer, or the west side of the property to be closer, and he thought that was a reasonable trade-off, and that's up for the committee to decide as well. But that's not an aesthetic consideration like people's front yards are as you drive on Ash Street. So I don't think that that's a reasonable offset or comparison, because that isn't something that's viewable, that backyard space.
I don't know that we're on the same wavelength, but it doesn't really matter.
Well, the 24 feet you're talking about, which is on the north side, is what I'm saying is that's not a trade-off, reasonable aesthetic trade-off to the 14 feet on the other side. Like you're making the argument that 20 feet somewhere else is equal to 20 feet.
You were the one who said, we had said that, we didn't. The trade-off is the rear yard,
Just to be clear.
near the lane to the north yard. The front yard's a totally separate issue.
Anyway, I suggested that was something I had said, sir, not Councilor Mays. But anyway,
Yeah.
we're we're not here to argue. So, but Councillor Mays did not mention that. I did, so. Councillor Dobson, any questions?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Nope. Okay, well, thank you, sir.
Okay,
Is
thank
Kim,
you.
is Kim Belton also speaking today?
No, she isn't speaking.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so that's all for the appellants. We also have additional folks here joining us to speak in support of the appeal. So on to them, we have Ian Dick joining us in person today.
Good morning, councillors. My name is Ian Dick. I am a planner with MRA Planning and Development. On behalf of area residents, our firm has been retained to provide our independent professional planning opinion about this proposed development. And there's a few points I'd like to present that largely echo what you've already heard from several of the appellants that raise question about whether these variances would meet the statutory bar for approval. So first is the substantial adverse effect on adjacent properties. As you've heard from the direct neighbors, they feel that they'll be directly impacted by this building's development, and that the 5 units versus the 4 configuration would be a significant impact, casting shadows, blocking their view to Academy Road, as well as the impact of traffic through the back lane. The impact of 5 versus lesser units obviously would have a greater impact on the neighborhood character and function. Secondly, is the proposed variances are not compatible with the established character of the surrounding residential block. As we've heard, Ash Street is characterized by an average of 39-foot setbacks to the front yard, to the property line, where this is proposing a 14-foot setback, which is fairly significant, as you've heard. It essentially creates a wall to the street that blocks the neighborhood character. Although the property is located along Academy, it fronts onto Ash Street and is legally addressed to Ash Street, whereas these variances effectively treat it as if it's fronting onto Academy Road, even though it's not. And thoughtful infill, would obviously density and development is desirable along Academy Road as the corridor, but it has to take in the context of the residential street in which it's located. Thirdly, these variances are not the minimum modification required to achieve reasonable development. As planning administration had written in their report, only a 5-foot setback from the front yard would be supported, consistent with the infill guidelines, whereas this is proposing a 400% increase on the variance to go down to 14 versus 25 feet. And as one of the neighbors pointed out, if you were to project this variance, it would essentially restrict the development footprint to the 4-unit configuration versus 5 units, which would still present reasonable development of the street, but be more context sensitive to the surrounding area. Fourth and last is that these variances create inconsistency with previous council decision-making. We've already heard about the infill guidelines and how they're kind of circumventing that in order to proceed. Council is also allowed up to 4 units as of right through the PDO, the zoning amendment that underwent significant council deliberation and public engagement. And this is already pushing that to 5 units instead of 4 that would have been reasonable on that site. We'd also note that the community committee that approved these variances over a month ago also rejected a very similar proposal on a corner lot on Oxford and Academy that also required significant variances in order to configure the site for 6 units instead of 4 or 5. So for these reasons, we would recommend that the variances be reversed and that the recommendation from planning administration be upheld to a 5-foot front yard setback instead of the 14-foot setback, or 5. It's confusing, the math here. 34 feet instead of 39. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Cole? No? I just have one question. You're referring to another application. Were the lots the same size?
They're very similar.
Were they the same size, the lots?
I don't have the dimensions in front of me.
Okay.
They would both be fronting onto Academy.
Okay, thank you.
Right, question for the admin arising out of that, I did not bring the infill guidelines with me, and we almost never deal with the 5s and the 6s, and that's the only part that still is alive. Is there any minimum lot requirement in there? I mean, you've gotta be near. You gotta have a lane, gotta have a paved lane. You gotta be at a corner or near a corner, I think. You were certainly near transit, 8 feet away. But this, is there's no minimum, is there frontage requirement or?
There are two main policy areas within the guidelines. There's the site and building design components, so the building max height, cladding materials, et cetera, and then the preferred location criteria. The preferred location criteria fully support a townhouse style development. So townhouses, 5 or more units. The preferred location criteria for townhouse multi-unit buildings in area 1 to be on the following basis. A, on sites where the rear yard abuts a lane. B, on sites located within 400 meters of the primary transit network. And C, where the property abuts an arterial street. This property satisfies those 3 components. So it's a town, 5 units is supported by the infill guidelines.
And I mean, you can, under the 2s, 3s, and 4s exercise, that we approved in June here, I mean, you could on a corner lot do it with a rear lane, do a 4-plex on it. Depth doesn't matter in those situations, but you 45 or 50, I think, without a lane, you need 60, that I do, but with a lane, I think you need, so this is a little bigger than what you could argue 75 wide, 120 deep. It's certainly bigger than the minimum size for a 4-plex.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long rambling way of getting to that.
So, yeah, I heard a lot about fourplexes. This is, well, I don't think don't think it's come to council yet, in terms of the rezoning to multifamily small. What are there different, setbacks and stuff related to multifamily small? I don't care
first
about the
point is-
fourplex. This is not a fourplex, it's a 5-plex.
Right, so the RMFS rezoning has gone to council and it has been approved at council. The entire process is not concluded, of course, but it has made its way to council. Are there distinctions between, just to, if I could repeat the question to you,
Well,
make sure I follow.
Well, okay, so if we have, like, actually, if you have an R1 or an R2, it's automatically you can build a fourplex, but this is being rezoned to a multifamily. What are the guidelines regarding multifamily small? Are there any differences between setbacks or anything like that regarding multifamily?
Right, it's a little bit complicated, but there are distinctions between RMFS and say R1 required yards. However, if the applicant chose to do a 4-unit building here, then what they would be subject to would be the dimensional standards of the 4-unit PDO. And so it would really depend on what they wanted to build in future in terms of what would control the yard requirements.
Yeah, but, okay, I'm not talking what it is. So it is zoned multifamily.
Right.
So I'm asking, do you still apply same setback requirements and everything regarding a multifamily small?
It depends on what they want to build. So there are totally different, like the standards will change depending on what their proposal is. So if they wanted to do like a low rise building here, which they could do with RMFS, and if they wanted to do a 5-unit low rise here, then they would be required to meet the standards of the RMFS zoning district. However, the infill guidelines would provide the policy box around which any variances would be considered. Does that answer the question? Sorry, I realized that was a bit of a.
basically on suppression. Okay. Well, thank you for your presentation, sir.
Thank you.
Did I have a? Oh, no, I didn't have. It's okay. Thanks.
Next we have Michelle Richard also joining us in person. Hi, I'm Michelle Richard of MRA Planning and Development. Ian spoke primarily on our professional lens from an urban planning perspective. I want to speak a bit about history and Academy Road. So going back 20 years to the inaugural R Winnipeg, Academy Road has played a very special role in urban planning. So it has, from that moment on, being considered as something very special from a village perspective. And that expectation to keep that look and feel and identity has permeated throughout all of the different types of plans that have been produced, including the Academy Road PDO, including infill guidelines and our Winnipeg 2.0. So I just want to encourage you not to lose sight of urban design and form. And I know that your new zoning bylaw is going to address much of this, but of course, from my perspective, density is incredibly important. Missing middle is incredibly important. This development will add vibrancy, but it shouldn't come at the expense of the identity of Academy Road. So I just wanted to leave that with you. Thank you.
You're speaking in.
Our firm has been hired to speak in support of the appeal. Sorry, Counselor.
Support of.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so we certainly just want to, I just want to leave with really imploring you to consider what the reconfiguration of Ash Street from a residential local street would do with the additional unit. It will take away from the existing look and feel and identity of the community. Thank you.
Question?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think again, your comments lead me to ask question of planners. The two things, would this fit our definition of missing middle? I don't think it does.
Somewhere in the middle there, to an extent, you know, I think that it depends on how broadly you want to characterize missing middle. There are lots of places, and I'll speak to that would say that a smaller townhouse development, like 5 units might be, but often it's sort of 4 and under. So
Yes, that's right. Okay.
it depends if you asked to some extent.
I mean, if you did go with the original planning recommendation of 34, not 14, the building's smaller, would you then, if you wanted to still do 5 units, then are you into the need for another, then like a variance on density, and you start going down that?
No, they could, because it's been approved to be rezoned to RMFS, and assuming that they were to go all the way and register it, then RMFS, 1 dwelling unit per 1,250 square feet of lot area, they could accommodate 5 units on this site. However, it depends on if they could design within the parameters of the 5 lines.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I kind of have one question. So on that particular piece of property, could they have put an apartment building? Because on Corydon, there's a lot of apartment buildings that would be matching in the area. Literally 1 street over, there's a big brown building 4 stories high. And it's on Corydon. Across the street, but it is on Corydon. And if you go down Ash, there is other developments as well, right close to the sidewalk, but it does have a sidewalk. So my question is, could they build is it possible for them to put in an apartment building there?
Like a
Maybe a
5 unit.
3-story high apartment building.
We would look to the infill guidelines again to provide policy direction on that. And yes, the infill guidelines would support a low rise building here. So, yes, largely whether it be a townhouse or a low-rise multi, both would be considered. They wouldn't be able to do, a walk-up apartment by right, based on what they currently had. But I mean, as we were saying earlier, they could do a 4-unit, which is up to 35 feet, sort of similar to a low-rise.
Okay, now that we've determined that, what would the setbacks be allowed for an apartment building? For the front and for the rear and for the side yard? I'm just saying, are they different?
A little bit. They I'll just need to pull up the site design components. So this is what we would look to guide our discussion on variances for a low-rise multi. So the side yard section where the property is located on an arterial or shares a property line with a non-residential use. A minimum of 6 feet is required for a building that is 35 feet or less in height. And 10 feet for a building that is 35 or greater, up to a maximum of 45 feet. So I can go through all of the side yards, but to a large extent, it's a larger design discussion that usually don't typically do them on the fly, because often there are some trade-offs along the way. So somebody would say, I'd like to do a low rise here. And we would look at the policies and say, well, does that support it? Yes or no? And then based on that, we say, well, we're going to ask for such and such a side yard in order to ensure that you align with this. It's hard to give you like a set answer on what a low rise would require here. But I mean,
I'm just
generally comparable.
looking down court or academy.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
I think it's really important to note where the front yard is. So the front yard is not Academy. That's really important. And there has always been a rigorous application, as was discussed, of alignment throughout River Heights to ensure that there's front yard alignment to protect the character of the area.
Thank you, Ms. Richard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any more questions. Yeah, it was good to hear your voice. I haven't heard it for a long time. All right.
So next up, we have Clancy Evans also joining us in person in support of the appeal. If you'd like to come and speak, you're welcome to.
I'm actually gonna, everybody's already said everything
Okay.
I think I was going to say, so I'll defer to Jim Burkett,
Sure.
for the Burketts, and everybody else that's spoken already, I'll say the same thing.
And Weber Evans, would you like to speak, or?
Then come on up.
Also in support of the appeal.
In support of it, yeah.
We're talking a lot about numbers, setback, all that stuff. As somebody who's lived on the street for 20 years and has walked my kids to school going down Ash to cross over Academy. The visibility when you're coming up to Academy is my concern right now. If you've got an extra building, another 20 feet, you're losing that sight, cars coming in off Academy onto Ash. When you're walking with little kids with their scooters and their bikes, there's no sidewalk. You need the visibility. You need every little bit of visibility. So if you take that away, you're going to have collisions. That's all I'm going to say.
Excuse me, I need clarification.
Yeah.
Are you talking about motor vehicles coming out of the back?
I'm
lane
talking about
onto Academy?
cars coming off of Academy onto Ash. So going north on Ash. When you're walking
so
south towards
yes.
Academy to get onto the sidewalk that is on Academy, you're walking on the street.
Right, but there's a sidewalk there.
There is no sidewalk, not on Ash. So
Really?
I can tell you when there's snow, like we have still, you're walking a couple of feet off the road, it's seconds, it's milliseconds where you're grabbing your kid and jumping into the snowbank because there's nowhere to go. So if you take just a little bit away from your visibility, it's going to affect somebody, and it's going to affect somebody very vulnerable.
14 feet setback, though, right?
There
That's-
is 14
that's quite
feet,
a-
but yeah,
It's
but
not like coming out of back lane. Like
No.
what I find dangerous on Academy Road and Corridon, when back lanes come out and you're walking along and the buildings sort of blocking the view, the motor vehicles decide they're just gonna fire off and there's a pedestrian there who could get hit, right? You're not concerned with the 6-foot backyard setback? I think that back lane comes right onto Academy, does it not?
Back lane goes, yeah, it goes right into the back lane.
Yeah.
I mean, mostly we would walk up the front street, like kids walk up, they play on the front street, they play like ball hockey, they're on the front street, and we don't have sidewalks, so they're on the street.
They're playing
So-
ball hockey near Academy Road, which is very busy.
Oh, they are, and they put
I
up
I would
cones.
prefer to set it up closer to Wellington Crescent.
Well, they do, they're not right on not right off Academy, but if they're walking to school, if they're riding their bikes to school, which I think we all want, I mean, it's urban density, we want people walking, riding their bikes, taking their scooters, we want to encourage our kids to do that. So, you know, one more building, you're just getting that much closer to the road, you're taking a little bit of visibility away. Is it a lot? I mean, it's not much, but when you're walking with kids, you need all visibility you can get. And if there are guidelines, why are the guidelines there? And why are we not following them? The guidelines are there for safety, for who knows what, but as a person who's lived on that street, who's raised her kids on that street, I don't want to see something happening and thinking, could that little bit extra visibility have made the difference? And why are we deciding against it when their recommendations are there for a reason?
Thank you. Don't think there's any questions from my colleagues, so. Thank you for coming up and making a point.
Is there anyone else whose name I haven't called who would like to speak in support of the appeal? Hey there.
James Stewart.
Oh, sure. So James Ferguson and Callan on the file. So you come up and speak, and you'll also get a chance to speak in rebuttal for the second time. You have up to 5 minutes. You can go ahead.
Morning, councillors, in this beautiful spring morning. I'm a resident of 78 Ash Street, so a little farther down. Have been for 35 years, so probably I have the most to say from a historical standpoint, and wanted to obviously speak strenuously in opposition to what the committee had agreed upon and supported the appeal. And I really feel that the committee was patently wrong in the decision it made. Not because we don't recognize the new infill guidelines and the implications to the neighborhood, but because it doesn't represent as required the mature communities planning area and has been spoken about Ash Street. Ash and two other streets, Waterloo and Oak, have unique characteristics. They are, for the most part, double lots. And so that, and they're unique because there isn't anybody else that has it. This is sort of on the end. Yes, it's only a 75-foot lot, but what attracted us there was the separation, quietness. Costs a lot to acquire a place there, and we pay significant taxes. Probably, other than somebody on Wellington Crescent, those three streets pay the most taxes of probably anybody in River Heights, which I guess gives us a little bit of clout when we come to you to say, please respect the guidelines. Andrea?
Well, I'm not sure what you're suggesting there, but it doesn't give you more clout. I mean, I've sat here for years listening to people ignore what I warrant, so however.
Could I finish?
Yeah, no, let's not argue.
Yeah, please don't.
I was gonna make that point, Councilor Mayhew.
What I'm
Just
saying,
let's leave that there.
what I'm saying is that the tax base, which is important to the city, is based on the property values. And one would hope that we don't do something that diminishes those property values. That's, but more important.
Actually, I'm not getting into that.
Okay, but let me please.
Actually raises property.
No, if the property value gets diminished. Anyway, small part. The bigger issue, and as Andrea pointed out, is we're contemplating building very close to the lot line. And with that, we're creating, as was described before, a wall. And personally, I fight for my life in trying to drive off of Ash Street to get onto Academy because the traffic is moving quickly. And I actually witnessed an accident where somebody trying to cross gets hit. And we just compound that. So from a safety standpoint, that is a factor. We're now building a huge building that's going to block that. And so, you know, why do it if we, you know, we support the infill concept, we support densification, but the rules are there for a fourplex. And I've heard all kinds of interesting discussions about that. But the reality of it is, if we were to keep this as, even if it went from 39 to 34 as the infill allows, it does allow that side yard, what is actually the front yard, to be preserved. It does allow for visibility. It doesn't affect the fact that we have no sidewalks from a safety standpoint. And this developer made the decision to, you know, buy the property, knew that the zoning requirements would allow for a fourplex, but, you know, give them an inch, take a mile, has pushed to do a fiveplex, which very much does impact everybody else on Ash Street. For what, to gain one additional family in the area, but to increase the traffic, the safety, all the things that were written in the various appeal justification we had for this. So that's my position.
I have a question. What is the size of your lot? This one is
100.
75 by 119,
Mine would be 100 by 115, 120.
or around there, okay. All right, I'm just curious. This seems to be a pretty sizable lot. Anyway, okay.
That's what is consistent all along that side of Ash, that one block.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also just note, we did have a Tara Campbell register to speak over Zoom today, but then Tara also emailed us she's not able to speak over Zoom, but I just wanted to note her as she did register. So is there anyone else who would like to speak in support of the appeal for this item? Is there anyone who would like to speak? Oh, sorry. So then now we can move on to then those in opposition to the appeal.
There's somebody, I'm
Yes.
gonna call for well, within 10 minutes by.
Break.
We're taking a break before we hear from, I think it'll be the applicant or
Correct,
applicant's
the applicant.
representative. Okay. Okay, we're back to continue our hearing, and we are about to hear from the applicant, Ms. Stolsky.
Correct, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have the applicant team joining us in person and we have Jeffrey Del Buono joining us in person.
Hi, my name is Jeff Del Buono. I'm the applicant and architect responsible for this project. I want to start by thanking everyone who's been involved in this process and for everyone that has spoken today. It shows how important projects like this are to the development of our city and to the neighborhoods that they're located in. White Label Homes, alongside the 160 Ash development team, relied heavily on the guidance of city officials, zoning officers, and area councilors from the very inception of our project in order to ensure our approach to developing the site was done tastefully and in accordance with the various development standards put in place to encourage densification. We appreciate the support of council through this process and feel that with their input have designed a building which responds to the growing needs of the Academy area and does it in a way that significantly reduces the impact on neighboring properties compared to a by rights alternative. North River Heights is defined as a mature community which is recommended for increased density by our Winnipeg 2045 Strategic Development Plan. Our property is located at the corner of a collector thoroughfare, which, as per the mature neighborhood infill guidelines, allows for taller building heights and higher unit counts. Our design has respected the size of neighboring properties and is a modest proposal compared to the multifamily and commercial properties which are in direct proximity across the street. As of March 26th City Council meeting, the rezoning of our property from R1 large to RMFS was voted for approval. This is a clear sign that the city is in support of densifying this property and that the proposal put forth by our team is both acceptable and appropriate for the area. If the proposed variances are denied, our team will be forced to redesign the development to meet as of right guidelines. This will mean that we likely need to pursue a multi-family building with increased density, smaller units, and less amenity in order to make the project financially viable. The option of up to 7 units will be available to us, given the new zoning designation and current lot size. A development of this typology would likely attract a different demographic of a renter, and would certainly have an increase in adverse effects on street parking, proximity to neighbors, and access to sunlight. Compared to this option, we feel our current proposal is much more in line with the expectations of the councilors and more befitting of what we see as one of Winnipeg's most desirable neighborhoods. Careful study will show that there are many precedents for similar setback reduction that can be seen up and down Academy. Nothing we are proposing is out of the context of buildings that are in direct adjacency to us. I want to focus a large portion of my presentation on addressing some of the concerns that have been heard from the community. We want to demonstrate to everyone that our team is open to dialogue and that many of the points raised have in fact been considered in our design. Visual obstruction for both pedestrians and vehicular traffic has been raised as a major downfall to the approval of our front yard setback. When only taking into account the building mass, this would be an accurate concern. When you compare, however, the existing conditions, which include full height fences and overgrown trees abutting the property line, the proposed location of the building being set back by 8 feet to Academy actually provides an increased visibility and a much clearer view for traffic. It significantly increases the visibility both on the lane side and on the Ash side. The red line on this diagram shows the site plan. So on this site plan demonstrates that the location of the existing fence lining the Academy Road. The blue lines at a 45-degree angle indicate the visibility sight line, which represents our current existing conditions. The green lines shown here demonstrate the increase of clear visible area afforded to oncoming traffic because of the proposed building location and reduction of overgrown vegetation. Through this exercise, we hope that it can be seen that our site design poses no negative impact to sight lines for vehicles or pedestrians. Another major point of clarification we would like to address is the clearing and storage of snow. The drive aisle orientation and landscaping areas have been laid out to permit the storage of snow at the west end of the driveway, which being the front yard, within property lines. This is shown by the blue dashed area noted on the site plan. As this will be a fully serviced rental property, tenants will expect that snow clearing be handled professionally and in a timely manner. Any excess snow accumulation will be removed from site to ensure proper access. Through our design process, our team has always taken the stance that if we are going to pursue variances and the pursuit of variances was required, it would need to be for both direct improvement of the overall project and for the reduction of impact to surrounding neighbors. It is important to remind everyone that the property in question is located at the corner of Academy and not mid-block. Our design, I have about 1 more minute if that's all right.
2-minute expansion.
2 minutes.
Thank
All
you.
right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead, sir.
Our design has embraced this fact from day one, and the pursuit of these variances will allow us to locate the building at the south end of the property to mitigate shading on our north neighbors, provide a dedicated vehicular lane to access rear-facing concealed double garages, which reduce on-site parking burden, allow for the greatest amount of separation with our neighbors, 42 feet between our building and the neighbor to the north and 72 feet to the east, will allow us to install a landscaping buffer between the building, our building and the north neighbor where tall, fast-growing trees will be planted, and embrace the pedestrian nature of Academy Road by orienting the building south with large fenestration and suite entrances that embrace the overall streetscape. Furthermore, the variances being pursued allow us to incorporate the 5th unit into the project, which has afforded us the opportunity to design a much more amenity-rich building with upgraded features such as large windows, south-facing terraces, brick facade arches, and a 2-to-1 parking ratio. Should the variances be denied, many of these amenities will no longer be viable. We truly feel that this will be to the detriment of the project overall and will leave the neighborhood with a subpar result should we be forced to design as of right. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today and thank everyone for their review of the project.
Okay, questions?
I had a couple questions.
Go ahead.
I retrieved the infill guidelines from my office. There's a provision about a minimum of 20% of the lot area should be reserved. As Councillor Dobson would say, always be wary of that word, should rather than shall. A minimum of 20% of the lot area should be reserved for soft landscaping. Are we around to that?
I believe that when taken into consideration of the buffer on the north, the 6 feet on the rear, and then also the 8 feet side yard on Academy, inclusive of what we have in the front yard, we would meet that requirement.
Okay, so that on the right-hand side, well, as we're looking at the right-hand side, the back lane side, there's a 8-foot buffer until you get to where you're driving in. Correct, okay. Can you just back up to your as of right slide there? You've only got, you have to rush through these things, give you only 5 minutes. Is that a height it's confusing, what?
Sure. So this is a site plan.
I'm looking down on it or across.
No problem. So this is a site plan which also shows the property to the north.
Okay.
We understand that there are concerns that a larger building affects sight lines. The red diagonal lines show the 45-degree recommendation in terms of affecting sight lines. Our building does not affect the sight lines out of the front of the neighboring property. And it doesn't really affect it even if you take it all the way further back to the side, the back side of what's currently built. The blue box is an example of what a as of right design would be with no variances required. As you can see,
We're looking down, there's an area.
correct, this is a site plan, yes.
So we got 6 parking slots off the
Correct.
back lane, you have, back lane, you are there, you're 4 feet-ish from,
4 to 6 feet from the north property.
okay. You could go up 35, I'm assuming? Yeah. Okay. I got confused, the 45-degree thing, we're used to hearing as a height thing, that's none of this breaches that. The often discussion of that malls and right, 45-degree, you gotta be 6 feet up in the air on the back property line, and then there's no issues with any of that 45-degree stuff. No, not at all. But that's not this 45-degree stuff, right? This is a view from the neighbors to the north.
Yeah, I understand. It sounds like it's a concern with traffic, which I suppose that I would maybe just offer that this was circulated to Public Works.
That, I get that one.
Yeah, so this one is for traffic, and
Now,
then,
this one, what's the 45-degree thing is not,
so
I'm
this is,
standing on the curb looking up, this is I'm standing in these folks' house.
front yard looking out
Okay.
onto the street. So this demonstrates that because of how far south our building is set back,
Okay.
it does not
So it's like
it does not disrupt
Oh,
use
no.
to Academy
Okay.
Street.
okay, got it, thank you. The 45-degree thing is a bit of a delayed here, but in different sense.
And again, I think it's important to recognize that currently the site has full height fences and overgrown trees, which provide a much more significant visual barrier. And in fact, impede visibility for traffic and for pedestrians currently more than we're proposing. And in fact, the proposal would actually increase sightlines on both the back lane and on Ashburn.
And you're providing 1 parking spot per unit?
Two parking spots per
okay, so you're
unit,
way over that.
2-to-1 parking ratio, all concealed within the building.
Okay, thank
One question
on that
other slide
showing
the 45s.
you. Can go back.
Those
red boxes on the right-hand side, what are they?
Those would be if we were doing as of right parking, how we would do parking.
How you align it the other way and
Correct.
right, okay, I understand that.
Okay. You had further questions?
No.
Or, Councillor?
I got one obscure one here, and again, they are guidelines, they're not yet rules. On sites greater than 100 feet in width, at least 50% of the parking should be located underground. We're under 100 feet in It's one of these, what's the front, what's the width, what's the depth?
Yeah, it's a should.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's not,
And he's not underground, but he's under the building.
yes.
It's not an apartment block.
And just rediscovering his guidelines.
I get it. Okay, I'm gonna ask a question while you're looking over. Just for clarification, I'm assuming there's a fence on the north side.
Correct.
But, have you got fencing anywhere near Academy Road?
There's no fencing near Academy Road.
No fencing at all, right? You got that 8 foot side yard and you have, how many of the, I think the entrance to the units, there's 4 entrances off Academy?
So there are, all 5 units have entrances off Academy, and then the westmost unit, which fronts Ash, also has an additional entrance on Ash with a walkway. And that elevation has been treated to the same level aesthetically and architecturally that the Academy facing facade has.
Shrubbery, looking at for along Academy there, no trees, right? You're gonna call, you know.
We do actually have planned trees and shrubbery along Academy and Ash as per the zoning requirements.
What kind of trees are you looking at on Academy?
To be honest, I don't recall the species. They would be deciduous trees and then grasses and shrubs that would be planted up against the building.
Keep them trimmed. People who are walking down sidewalks who are blind, they hate rubbing their face into branches, right? I only had one last question.
Go ahead,
So you got a 6 foot buffer, you got a fence on the north side, right?
Correct.
And you're planting what, prairie sky poplars or something like that?
We are planting, I believe, some poplars and either birch or maple. Again, apologies, I don't know the species. off
Maple's
my head.
pretty slow growing. Anyway, okay. All right, Councillor Meeks.
Just looking at the sample building and the guidelines, it's very much what you're showing is the as of right. 2 questions, I think both for the planner. The guidelines are saying you can go 45 feet in height if it's the intersection of a local and a collector. I don't know.
It's an arterial.
Still, the 35 feet is the height max here.
The permitted height max is 35. They would need a variance to go beyond that.
Given that it's 70 something by 120 something, and you had said earlier you get a unit for every 1,200. Ballpark math, the 7 units that were cited seemed accurate or very close to me.
Yeah, that's correct. They would be, with RMFS, they would be permitted at 7 units. But then they would be working with just the RMFS dimensional standards. And so then if they were seeking a variance, then that's when the indoor guidelines would come back in. If they're looking for entitlements, basically.
5 units as of right under that design, but yeah. Thank you.
Is that Councillor Meeks?
Sadly, yes, I think, yeah.
I think, anyway, you are bringing the plan approval back to community committee, right? Is that right? Okay, I have no further questions. So thank you very much for your presentation and, we'll be moving along once we've heard from everybody and we'll make our decision.
So next up, in opposition to the appeal, we have Steve Stephenson. Oh, sure, Scott Stephenson first. Okay. Scott Stephenson joining us in person.
Okay.
Hi, folks. Good afternoon.
Thanks for the opportunity to present. I don't have a physical presentation, Councillor Edie. I'm just going to speak on behalf of the ownership group. I am the owner and developer of 160 Ash Street. And I do live on one of the streets that Mr. Ferguson talked about. I do live on Waterloo and have for some time, over 25 years. So I do have an understanding and appreciation for this neighborhood. And part of the reason that drew us in December 2024 to purchase this unique property on Academy Road. So on Academy Road and Ash Street, as we've talked about, this is a bit of a unique parcel that attracted us to. The vendor at the time had talked specifically about a multifamily development that he had discussed briefly with the city of Winnipeg. And when we purchased the property, there was some notion that the city would, under the guidelines, et cetera, that we've been talking about, would be acceptable to a multifamily development. I'm here to talk about process and engagement. There's been some discussion around engagement and the response to the engagement by the developer and our consulting team. I just want to mention that in March 2025, we began the engagement process with the planning office, city administration, and took into consideration major portions of their feedback, albeit the one specific variance that's been just talked about today on the front yard. For reasons from a development perspective, the 5-unit made sense both financially and afforded us, frankly, to put, as Jeff talked about, the amenities in place that are in keeping with the design of River Heights. The initial market test, we did speak with not everybody within the province or within the street. Thank you, Steve. We did take advice from both the ward councillor, Councillor Orlico, who we met with on 3 different occasions, and took his advice, and also took the advice from the city on what the engagement process would look like. So we did engage immediate adjacent folks. In July 2025, which as it is noted, we made our application and this application process started. I'll just note that the immediate adjacent neighbors did purchase this property after the application process was underway. Okay. Our redesign process that we went through, we addressed major concerns that we saw that were raised by both the immediately adjacent neighbors. Of course, some of those things, including the front yard variance that's being discussed today, we didn't address everybody's specific variance. Why this site? Why this design? Housing diversity, providing options in an established high demand area of Winnipeg in accordance with the infill guidelines with the city of Winnipeg. Design focus, we prioritize neighborhood and content sensitive architecture, respecting scale and finish on Academy Road, in particular on this area in the commercial district and in North River Heights. I must remind everybody again that we did receive RMFS density approval. There is a process to complete this, but I think part of that is the support from the city of Winnipeg because of its specific location and the examples that were utilized before mid-block. There's no burden on existing parking. I'm going to skip that because we have discussed this. Trying not to repeat some of the things that Jeff has indicated. At an increase of cost to align with the neighborhood, we moved away from the permitted fourplex. Instead, we moved to, which would show complex or simple design, expanded side yard encroachment and multiple lane facing vehicular access points. This was one of the main objections that were raised by one of the immediately adjacent neighbors, the multiple vehicular access points. This was all done in the consultation with the then owner of the immediately adjacent homeowner and the immediately adjacent neighbors and with the city of Winnipeg. Our feeling is that this appeal is based specifically on the multifamily aspect of this development and the concept of not in our neighborhood, not on our street. This was made particular of note on the folks that have spoken today that live on Ash. We are trying to be good neighbors, and that's what we tried to do by this specific and long engagement process with both the city of Winnipeg and following the guidelines. We have addressed most of these, and as I mentioned before, this is a unique application. It is not mid-block. I want to address one thing, and because we don't get an opportunity to counterpoint, there has been a misrepresentation that we represented in our community committee meeting a notion of support. At no point did we notion anything beyond the discussions. At no point did I say there was support. What I did say, and it can be viewed, was that there were objections raised. We did our best to mitigate those objections. As you can appreciate in the neighborhood, it is very difficult to have folks come out who live in the neighborhood to provide support. They live and breathe in this neighborhood, even though they may want to see their neighborhood change for a positive change like this. It's very, very difficult to get folks to come out and sit like the folks in opposition of this application. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation. Good timing.
Okay, question? No?
The parking, you skipped over the parking, so to be fair, what were you?
Yeah, my point on the parking was in a as of rights, as Jeff pointed out, those 6 stalls off the back. I am a developer. I have another block like this. One of the things that we have is a 6 parking stall off the back lane. And we did talk to the immediately adjacent neighbors, and they wished that we had a different approach to that. So we did speak to the immediately adjacent neighbors behind us, and that was their major objection. They did utilize an existing development on Lindsay Street as an example of what they didn't want to see. And that showed garages right off the laneway and having multiple cars, having width access. And so our approach to that was a single point of access with hidden parking. So that's all I wanted to mention, but it had been mentioned before.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, we get people objecting all that there's no parking provided. Oh my God, it'll all be on the neighboring street. It's a valid concern. You're socializing the pain and private, but you're putting in 10 slots here. Sounds like.
We are in keeping with the neighborhood, and the folks that live up and down Ash, they also have double car garages and et cetera. I understand that there's an increase in density. We're trying to be as sensitive as we can to the access points, to the points that were raised by the folks, including the access off Academy and access off Ash. And as Jeff had pointed out, those sight lines are being, we're making best efforts to improve those.
Grossly obscure question, but the actual entry, the drive, it's you're driving north, you get past the buffer thing, 24 feet then width.
We have a 20-foot drive aisle with a 4-foot setback off the property line. I think it's between 4 and 6 feet, Jeff, with the landscape buffer, which again, we had taken into consideration. We wanted to ensure that we got as far away from the neighbor. And when we presented to the then owner, they had agreed that that was a good solve.
So we had a delightful debate about how wide the driveway needed to be for fourplexes, that I won't dwell on. Mr. Chair, if I can ask a question of the staff again? Just coming out of that.
The owners.
There's thinking the guidelines, parking spaces internal to or underneath the building allocated at grade will generally be discouraged. Parking in this manner will only be considered where both of the following conditions are met. Again, generally be discouraged isn't exactly the hard-hitting legal language. Parking is separated from an adjacent street by residential or commercial uses, and where the building form and massing resulting from this form of parking will not create negative impacts for adjacent users. So is this, I mean, this is at grade, right? It's not, but there was no issues with that?
No, the intent of the clause or policy there is to obscure parking from the public realm, probably to conceal vehicles.
Yeah,
to some extent.
So,
Which they've done with an attached garage and the landscape buffer.
okay, thank you.
Actually, in that, 2 parking for each unit, what in the guidelines is it 1.5?
The guidelines push for 1.2 parking.
1.2
per unit. If somebody really wants to provide more parking and they do not need a variance to do that, don't really want to prevent somebody from providing more parking than is required.
I'm gonna ask the owner developer, so the parking and having the garages, was that a trade-off rather than going to 7 units? You wouldn't have had a parking.
We haven't considered 7 units. Our density maximum that we've talked about for this site has always been 5 units. We're trying to be sensitive to the area. The reason that we went to a 2-stall parking is because of some feedback that we received from potential tenants. We have had discussions with potential tenants. In fact, we've got 3 names that are people that want to move into these people, move in place in the neighborhood. That's what we were looking for. So folks that are moving out of very large homes with 100-foot lots, looking for an opportunity to divest themselves as they age in place.
They're not riding bikes, right?
Yeah, frankly,
Okay.
we don't anticipate 2 cars in some of these places, but we can't control that.
Can also work for storage. All right. I don't think we have any more questions.
One more,
Oh,
if I
you-
may, one
okay.
more for
Yeah, please. do.
planner. I think it's fair to say, well, if this gets bounced and then they go back, they can pursue as of right, no public hearing and setbacks change, height stays same. This isn't part of that area where there's no, we've got that odd business where you're 800 meters from the BRT, there's no parking required, right? But if they come back with a 6-unit, 7-unit building, they are presumably required to provide, I'm trying to remember. I mean, you're outside the fourplex guidelines, so what's the parking deal if they come back with 6 or 7?
It would be one stall per dwelling unit. Yeah.
Can I respond to that? Can I?
That's why we're
Yeah, I think
asking.
that's a fair.
That's why we're
Yeah.
asking. Go ahead.
From our perspective, we are a neighborhood developer and we really believe in this concept. To be frank, if we are declined, we have a couple of different options from our perspective. I have no desire to tick off our neighbors anymore. We want to work with our neighbors. We want to ensure that this is development that people will move in place. So frankly, one of our options is to sell it, and it is multifamily. And if somebody else wants to come in and do something that's not in keeping with, I don't want anything to do with it. I want to develop a very nice unit in this area. It's not strictly driven by profit. As I said, I live on Waterloo. We've lived in this neighborhood for 25 years. So it is in keeping with the design. We think it's a very good concept. So in saying that, Councillor Mays, we don't have any desire to go to that option, to poke in the nose of our fellow neighbors, because we really enjoy this neighborhood.
In River Heights, okay, just Waterloo north of Academy.
I've lived on Niagara, north of Academy, mid-block for a long time.
Well, you're Niagara. Okay.
I'm now Waterloo.
Oh, now.
Waterloo. I've owned 3 homes in River Heights.
Right.
I moved south of Academy.
All right.
Yep.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yes, of course.
I think we're done asking questions, so we'll be making a decision after we hear everybody. And there is rebuttal from the appellants.
Next, we have Steve Stevenson joining us in person. Also, no, Stephenson, sorry.
I don't have much to add. Let's take the chair. I just wanted to add that.
Well, wait till you get in the chair.
Okay.
The microphone.
So as I said, Jeff and Scott have addressed many of the counterpoints or the concerns that have been brought up today in the appeal. One element from a personal investment in this, my wife grew up in that neighborhood. And so part of the motivation for developing this is it allows us that move in place to move into the neighborhood. We spend a lot of time with kids that don't live in Winnipeg and so on. And this would be one of those kind of things, something that I could move into and become one of the neighbors.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you for that. I don't think we have any questions. You were pretty succinct. So, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to the appeal? Is there anyone who would like to speak for information to the appeal? So at this point, it would be questions to the public service.
Oh, hello, hello.
You're an appellant. Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Art, yeah, I think you're one of the appellants, are you, sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to address some of the points. I just don't know if this is the right time or not.
Well,
Can you
hang
tell
on.
me?
We'll let you know when it's your turn.
Thanks.
We're just, if there are any final questions, we're gonna ask the administration, but I think we asked them all, didn't we?
Can I just,
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's a fair, it's not a game, it's a fair scenario. We always have this with height variances, right? Well, people complain, you go, they're entitled to 35 feet if they've built a single family home, so be careful what you wish for, kind of thing here. So, just so I'm clear, so if this doesn't proceed,
as of right, as a consequence, there's no rezoning, there's no more public hearings, you just, here, you can build within this box, and you can still ask for variances, but then you have to go through this. Again, the 35 feet, they can build within 4 feet of the north property line. Gotta provide parking, gotta provide one parking per unit, that's gotta come off the lane, that's pretty easy. Doesn't have to be covered, but does have to come in off the lane, there's various landscaping requirements. The size of the box would be,
The front yard at 39 feet, I believe, like without the variance, or whatever the committee were to decide on the front yard for that matter. The rear yard is 25 feet. Corner side yard, 5 feet, so but it's a special yard on Academy, so likely give or take what they currently have. And then 35 feet is the maximum building height.
and distance from a pad would still. I guess that's a side yard, so that's a.
Yeah, I can pull up the special yard because there's
No, I'm just, that's okay.
it's around 7 or 8 feet. It would be a reduced yard to Academy.
More of a square than a rectangle. As of right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, is that it, Council? Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Stolsky, you can call back, our appellants, who was I can't remember who the first appellant.
So first we have Kyle Burkett.
That's it.
So again, just for the appellants, this is your chance to speak in rebuttal to anything you've heard so far. Just no new information is permitted. No, okay. Brittany Burkett, would you like to speak? Same, okay. Okay, so then we have Curtis Boughton joining us online. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, you did. Yeah, I have some things. First off is I appreciate the fact that the developer has had a design process and made an assumption or a statement that, not in my backyard. And I don't think any of the residents who are against or for the appeal are making that case. We all recognize that multifamily developments are part of the city's design future, and we are opposed to the front yard and changing the aesthetics. And I also think that the it could be worse argument of what they might build or could build is not relevant to the appeal process at this point, right? Is we need to address the major issue, which is, does this meet the infill guidelines and the guidance of the city planners, right? And what the minimum modification rules that exist currently for the city of Winnipeg are, okay? And although the developer feels that they are developing with respect for the community, their goal, which has been stated by the architect and the developer themselves, is to maximize their profit, okay? And there has to be a balance here between the councillors have to find between what is a reasonable development for developers to make profit and what there is a protection for the community and the aesthetics of the community. And that's what we're asking the appeal process to ring out here is that there's a balance here. And I don't espouse to the argument that was presented by the architect that if they can't build 5 units, then they're going to have to be, the insinuation was low income housing that wouldn't be appreciated in the neighborhood. And we can build upscale housing if we build 5, but if we build 7, they have to be smaller units and they have to be, low income type of housing. I think that's a really disingenuous argument because there are many spaces that are smaller in lots of upscale communities from Winnipeg to Toronto to Vancouver that are developed, that are upscale. So that notion that we have to live with something that's, disadvantageous because we go from 5 units to 4, I think is a very disingenuous and alarmist argument. And really don't appreciate that being part of the discussion. And the last thing I want to say is with regards, it keeps getting brought up, this 24-foot north side buffer to the Burkett's property, okay? And that is a disingenuous trade-off to the aesthetics on the front yard of Ash Street, which this property is an Ash Street property. It is not an Academy property. And there is no aesthetic trade-off to the front yards and the front yard setbacks that are normal on this street, and also the safety concerns that cutting off any sight lines, in this case, 20 feet more than the city planner has suggested, to go from 35, which a variance to the infill guideline allows, or 34, down to 14 on a street that has no sidewalks. Okay, and cars coming around the corner, and any loss of sight line is a safety hazard. I do not think that that is a fair trade-off. And so to suggest that the 24-foot north side, buffer to the Burkett's property to allow for parking is some kind of equal trade-off to 20 feet on the frontage and the aesthetics of Ash and the safety of Ash residents is not an equal trade-off. And I appreciate the committee's time, and I hope that you will see to find a balance between building infill properties, which would allow for more density, and the chorus of residents who have spoken here, taken the time out of their busy schedules, just like everyone has for this hearing, to say that they want to see the front yard of Ash Street maintained. And there is a chorus. It's essentially every resident on this street that wasn't involved with either the selling. The only people that are for this property are the developer who bought the property from the Burkett's old property, who owned the Burkett's property before, who was in support of it, and he now lives across the street, and he's in support of it because he sold the developer the property. So there's only 3 properties that are supporting it, and they all have an incestuous relationship with the property that was sold. And so the vast chorus of residents on Ash Street are telling council that they want to, the appeals committee, that they want to see a balance between developing the property.
Yeah,
That was new information, sir. You're not allowed to provide new information.
Okay, well, strike that, but I just want to say that the vast chorus of residents want to see a balance between multifamily and preserving the guidelines that are set out by the city of Winnipeg in their documents and what the city planner has recommended.
Thank you. All right, who's next?
Okay, and next up we have James Ferguson. In person.
Thank you. Just 2 very brief points. Firstly, there's lots of discussion about the consultation and support and whatnot. The most valuable thing and the most cogent thing for this appeal committee is that the Burketts, who live immediately next door, adjacent to it, are in opposition to it. I think that needs to be weighed significantly, as Mr. Broughton had said, everybody else on the street. The last point is that I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that the district planner did not approve the reduction of the 34-foot setback. It's all about the setback. I mean, certainly it's appreciative of what the developer has done and tried to be sensitive. And I do appreciate your commentary about trade-offs and everything. But what does affect all of us is that setback, because it changes the complexion of the street. And as Michelle Richards said, this is a very old and established neighborhood that we would like to keep like that. My house is 98 years old. Every crack and leak in it that you'd expect, but that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I actually live in a very older neighborhood than River Heights. Just
My sympathy.
Nice. Anyway, any questions? No? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Could we get clarity, not from Mr. Ferguson, I don't think I might have wanted to ask him, but was the vote unanimous at the community committee? Or perhaps I am.
Well, I don't think that's relevant.
I think it's relevant.
The committee passed it, so.
I believe it was, yes.
I don't
I
see
believe
any
it-
indication otherwise.
That's
It
new.
was
You know what? That's new information.
Okay.
It's not a jack for it then.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. The committee passed, so that's what it is, right? All right. Do we have any other appellants?
That's everything. So it'll be time for motions, Mr. Chair.
We're gonna entertain the motion. Counselor Dobson, Counselor Mays.
Do you wanna wade in?
I can do it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to move that the report of the Winnipeg Public Service be taken as read.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that's carried.
I move that the receipt of the public representations be concluded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried.
I move that in accordance with subsection 2473 of the City of Winnipeg Charter, the variance is, I'm not sure if I got this correct, is consistent. That's what the city center
Correct, that is
Okay.
what they, yes.
is consistent with Plan Winnipeg and any applicable secondary plan. Does not create a substantial adverse effect in the amenities, use, safety, and convenience of the adjoining property and adjacent area, including an area separated from the property by a street or waterway, is the minimum modification of the zoning bylaw required to relieve the injurious effect of the zoning bylaw on the applicant's property, and is compatible with the area in which the property to be affected is situated. My supporting reasons are that number one, it is a corner unit. It has 2 parking spots per unit, which is above average. It does not have unsightly parking in the back lane, which I definitely, I don't like that. The pedestrian sightlines are better versus the fence and trees currently there. It's by a bus stop. The fact that there's a tremendous need for housing and provides the ability for people in the area to live in the area. And it's an attractive building. That's my supportive reason.
Very difficult file. Good, respectful hearing. I would say 2 things. Nobody, I don't think it was fair to talk about the neighbors having a not in my backyard or not on my street perspective. I don't think that's fair. Also, I don't think anyone on the developer side vaguely or explicitly threatened low income housing was coming if this gets bounced. So, but by and large, things are polite and professional and well said, which we appreciate here. I am torn between the infill guidelines, which I was looking at some old notes of mine, and there was 6 things that could still salvage this term from the previous term, and one of them was getting through some amendments and the infill guidelines. We got that through. They're getting replaced now by rules, not guidelines, but there's this weird stub left of the 5s and the 6s. So here we are. So I'd want to thank the planners for sticking to the guidelines and not just doling out variances like candy. Like, it's, here are the rules, play by the damn rules. I really appreciate that. On the other hand, I think there's a trade-off here, right? I think it is fair to say, well, if they don't get this extra 20 feet, could it be a worse building for the neighborhood? I think it could. As Dobson says, you've got additional parking, and it always comes up that people hate the overflow of parking onto their street. So they got 10 slots here. It's more than they have to do. They've got a drive aisle that's way wider than what we require for fourplexes, so that helps. Getting in and out of the lane. They're not asking for a height variance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it hinges, as Mr. Ferguson said, but ultimately it hinges on that one setback off the front, well, off the Ash side. Okay, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced granting the appeal would produce a better building or better result for the neighborhood. It might, you take that gamble, but the rezoning's gone through, so you could come back with more units, less parking, same height, maybe a couple of feet higher. So I guess to me, the deciding thing, and maybe if Councillor Edie comes in a particular way, maybe I'll switch back. I don't know. We haven't voted yet. I'm really torn here, but I think if the planners come to me at some point and said, well, you were willing to blow off the infill guidelines on this, I would say, yeah, but the area council signed off on that because they got all these other things. They got the better, it was a good deal. So I'm not gonna second guess at the end of the day, Councillor Orlico on this, who, it's his ward, it's that community committee's decision. So with some reluctance, because I do take a lot of pride in the infill guidelines, but in this case, I think that the trade-off is not bad, frankly, maybe producing a better building. So I'll vote with Councillor Dobson unless Councillor Edie convinces me otherwise.
Neighborhoods, old neighborhoods do change, and according to the new zoning and all these other things that are in place, expecting infill to produce what has existed for 100 years or whatever. Actually, for me, the most disappointing thing I heard today is there's no city sidewalk on Ash. Somebody in the distant past decided that that local improvement shouldn't happen and try to get a vote to put in a sidewalk now, where they would pay a local improvement. That's very disappointing to me. But I will be supporting Councillor Dobson's motion. And I think I heard enough. I mean, I understand the front yard is not the same as the rest of the street. But it is 14 feet, and I don't believe there's any adverse effects as a result of having a 14-foot front lot. The sight lines and everything will be fine for traffic moving back and forth. There's many, even the back lane coming out onto Academy Road with no fence and treating it more like a front yard with, hopefully they're not creating a bush that makes it difficult to get out of the back lane onto and blocks people's view either in a motor vehicle or pedestrian. From an oncoming motor vehicle, you could even hear sounds if there's no fence. So I'm not agreeing with those kind of arguments. So I will be voting in support due to that. I mean, there are some effects that are happening, but I think a lot of it is just, I mean, it is aesthetics to a certain degree. No matter what gets built here on this property in River Heights, it's always more expensive to live in River Heights. Always. Well, in some of my areas. So in that, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
Okay, I move that the appeal be denied and the decision of the City Center Community Committee be concurred.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
And I move that the variance order DAB 253320/2025D be confirmed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That is carried.
And I move that the
Nobody's
public hearing with respect to these appeals be concluded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
Please note that the committee has made a final decision on this matter, which is not subject to further appeal.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Dobson's moving adjournment.
Yes.
Thank you.
When are we back?
Everybody's
Said
in.
The 20th, the Monday, it's a Monday. It was because of the Easter. The 20th. We have two items.
You got what?
They're V finals, they're not.